The sun hung low over the dusty plains of Willow Creek, casting a golden hue across the small town's weathered wooden fences and the single brick church at its heart. The air buzzed with anticipation, not just for the wedding that was about to take place but for the whispers that had been swirling through the town for weeks. Clara Thompson, the bride-to-be, was the talk of every porch and saloon. Not because of her charm or grace, though she had plenty of both, but because of her size. Clara was a big woman, broad-shouldered, heavy-set, with a presence that filled any room she entered. And in a town where folks clung to narrow ideas of beauty, that made her a target. Clara had come to Willow Creek 2 years prior, a seamstress with a knack for turning scraps of fabric into dresses that could make anyone feel like royalty. She'd set up shop in a small corner of the general store, her nimble fingers working magic with a needle and thread. Her laugh was loud, her smile wide, and her heart bigger than the plains themselves. But to many in town, she was an oddity, a woman who didn't fit their mold of what a bride should be. When word got out that she was engaged to Tom Harper, a rugged cowboy with a quiet demeanor and a ranch just outside town, the whispers turned vicious. "She's too big for a wedding dress, Mrs. Langley," the town's self-appointed gossip, had said at the general store, loud enough for half the town to hear. Poor Tom, he must have lost a bet. Clara heard it all. She wasn't deaf to the snickers or blind to the sideways glances. But she held her head high, her brown eyes steady, her hands never faltering as she stitched her own wedding dress. It was a simple design, cream-colored with delicate lace at the neckline, tailored to hug her curves in a way that made her feel beautiful. She didn't care if the town approved. Tom loved her, and that was enough. Tom was a man of few words, his face weathered by years under the sun, his hands calloused from roping cattle. He'd fallen for Clara not because of how she looked but because of how she made him feel, seen, understood, alive. He'd proposed under the big oak tree by the creek, his hat in his hands, his voice steady as he told her she was his home. Clara had cried, laughed, and said yes before he could even finish. But the town didn't see their love. They saw a mismatch, a lean, handsome cowboy and a woman they deemed too large to be his bride. The cruelty peaked the day before the wedding, when Clara stepped out of her shop to hang a sign announcing she'd be closed for the ceremony. A group of young men, fueled by cheap whiskey and boredom, stood across the street, laughing loud enough to draw a crowd. "Look at that dress," one of them shouted, pointing at the cream gown displayed in her shop window. "Ain't no way she's squeezing into that." The others roared, their laughter sharp as a blade. Clara froze, her hand still on the sign. She felt the eyes of the town on her, the weight of their judgment pressing down. For a moment, she wanted to run, to hide, to rip the dress to shreds and call the whole thing off. But then she straightened, smoothed her apron, and turned back to her shop without a word. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Inside, she sat at her sewing table, her hands trembling. She didn't cry. She'd promised herself years ago she'd never cry over people who didn't deserve her tears. But the hurt lingered, a dull ache in her chest. She wondered if Tom ever heard the whispers, if he ever doubted her. The thought made her stomach twist. The next morning, the church was packed. Not out of love for Clara and Tom, but out of curiosity. Folks wanted to see if she'd dare walk down the aisle, if she'd wear that dress, if she'd falter under their stares. The pews were filled with familiar faces, Mrs. Langley in her usual front row seat, her lips pursed, the young men from the street, still smirking, and others who'd whispered behind their hands for weeks. Clara's few friends sat near the front, their smiles tight with worry. Tom stood at the altar, his black suit pressed, his hat resting on a chair nearby. His eyes were fixed on the door at the back of the church, steady and calm. Beside him stood his daughter, Lily, a 6-year-old with wild curls and a gap-toothed grin. Lily adored Clara. From the moment they'd met, the little girl had clung to her, enchanted by her stories and the way she'd sneak her extra cookies when Tom wasn't looking. Lily was the flower girl, her basket of petals swinging in her hand as she fidgeted with excitement. The organ began to play, a soft hymn that filled the church. The doors opened, and Clara stepped inside. The room went quiet, not the reverent hush of a wedding, but the stunned silence of a crowd caught off guard. Clara stood there, her cream dress glowing in the sunlight that streamed through the windows. The lace at her neckline framed her face, her dark hair pinned up with a single white flower. She was radiant, her chin high, her eyes locked on Tom. But the silence didn't last. A snicker broke out from the back, followed by another. Mrs. Langley coughed loudly, a sound that was more scorn than surprise. The young men from the street whispered to each other, their grins sharp. Clara's steps faltered, just for a moment. She felt the weight of every eye, every whisper, every laugh. Her hands tightened around her bouquet, the stems biting into her palms. She wanted to run, to disappear, to be anywhere but here. But then she saw Tom, his face soft with love, his eyes never leaving her. And beside him, Lily, bouncing on her toes, her smile brighter than the sun. Clara took another step, then another, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. She wouldn't let them win. She wouldn't let their cruelty steal this moment. She was halfway down the aisle when it happened. Lily broke free from Tom's side, her little boots clattering on the wooden floor. She ran toward Clara, her basket of petals forgotten, her arms outstretched. The crowd murmured, confused, as the little girl stopped in front of Clara and looked up at her with wide, shining eyes. "She's pretty, Daddy," Lily's voice rang out, clear and high, cutting through the whispers like a bell. "Clara's the prettiest bride in the whole world." The church went silent again, but this time it was different. The snickers died, the smirks faded, every head turned to the little girl, her words hanging in the air. Clara froze, her breath catching. She looked down at Lily, who was beaming up at her, oblivious to the crowd, to the judgment, to anything but the woman she adored. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. She knelt down, her dress pooling around her, and pulled Lily into a hug. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick. Lily hugged her back, her small arms tight around Clara's neck. "You're gonna be my mama now, right?" she asked, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Clara laughed, a soft, shaky sound. "If you'll have me," she said. "I will," Lily declared, and she grabbed Clara's hand, tugging her toward the altar. "Come on, let's get married." The crowd didn't know what to do. Some shifted uncomfortably, their laughter replaced by something else, guilt, maybe, or shame. Others smiled, touched by the little girl's sincerity. Mrs. Langley's pursed lips softened, just a fraction. The young men in the back looked at their boots, their smirks gone. Clara stood, her hand in Lily's, and continued down the aisle. The organ played on, but it was Lily's voice that echoed in her heart. She reached Tom, who took her other hand, his eyes shining with pride and love. He leaned in, his voice low. "She's right, you know. You're the prettiest thing I've ever seen." Clara smiled, her heart full. The ceremony began, the pastor's voice steady as he led them through their vows. Clara promised to love Tom, to stand by him, to be his partner in all things. Tom promised the same, his voice rough with emotion. Lily stood between them, clutching Clara's hand, her basket of petals now scattered across the floor. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause, not the polite clapping of obligation, but something warmer, something real. Clara looked out at the crowd and saw faces that had mocked her now softened, some even teary. She didn't know if it was Lily's words or the sight of their love, but for the first time, she felt seen not as the obese bride, but as Clara, loved, chosen, enough. The reception was held in the field behind the church, under a sky turning pink with sunset. Tables were laden with food, roast chicken, cornbread, apple pie, and a fiddler played a lively tune. Clara and Tom danced their first dance, her dress swirling around her, his hand steady at her waist. Lily joined them, spinning in circles until she was dizzy, her laughter infectious. As the night went on, people approached Clara, some with apologies in their eyes, others with kind words they hadn't bothered to offer before. Mrs. Langley even managed a stiff compliment about her dress, though it was clear the words pained her. Clara accepted it all with grace, but she didn't need their approval anymore. She had Tom's hand in hers, Lily's arms around her waist, and a future that felt brighter than she'd ever dared dream. Later, as the stars came out and the fiddler slowed his tune, Clara sat with Lily in her lap, watching Tom talk with a group of ranchers. The little girl was half asleep, her head resting against Clara's chest. "You meant what you said, didn't you?" Clara asked softly, brushing a curl from Lily's face. "About me being pretty?" Lily nodded, her eyes heavy. "You're pretty 'cause you're kind," she mumbled. "And you love me and Daddy." Clara's heart swelled. She kissed Lily's forehead, holding her close. The whispers of the town, the laughter, the cruelty, they faded into nothing against the weight of this moment. She was Clara Harper now, wife to Tom, mother to Lily, and no one could take that away. As the night wound down, Clara and Tom slipped away to their ranch, Lily asleep in Tom's arms. The house was small but warm, filled with the promise of a life built together. Clara hung her wedding dress on the wall, a reminder of the day she'd walked through fire and come out stronger. She didn't know if the town would ever fully change, but she knew she didn't need them to. She had her family, her love, her home. And that was more than enough.